I'm standing in the executive boardroom of Sterling and Partners, watching my so-called best friend Aria claim credit for my 2 years of work, when I realize something that makes my blood run cold. She's not just stealing my project, she's been systematically destroying my career from the inside for years. And she has no idea I know. As you can see, Aria says, clicking through what I recognize as my PowerPoint slides with her name plastered over mine, the customer engagement strategy I've developed will boost revenue by 42%. The board members nod approvingly while I stand frozen in the doorway, invisible to everyone except her. When our eyes meet, she doesn't even flinch. Just smiles that sweet smile I've trusted for 9 years and keeps talking. But here's what Aria doesn't know. I've spent the last 3 weeks unraveling every lie she's told, every opportunity she's sabotaged, every time she's whispered poison in the right ears to make me look incompetent. I have screenshots, recordings, and a paper trail that would make prosecutors jealous. And in exactly 38 minutes, during the presentation she thinks will get her promoted to strategy director, the position that should be mine, I'm going to destroy her career so thoroughly that she'll be lucky to get hired at a retail store. The revenge I have planned, it's going to be absolutely perfect. Comment below, have you ever had a friend betray you? What's your city? I want to know where my amazing viewers are watching from. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this betrayal didn't happen overnight. My name is Maya Patel, I'm 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I genuinely believed Aria Chen was my closest friend and biggest supporter. We met in college, Boston University, communications program, and bonded over late-night study sessions and our shared dream of working in digital marketing for a major agency. Aria was the extroverted one, always making friends, always knowing what to say. I was quieter, more focused on the work itself, but we balanced each other perfectly. At least I thought we did. After graduation, we both landed entry-level positions at different agencies in Seattle. Aria started at a trendy startup while I got into Sterling and Partners, one of the top marketing firms on the West Coast. It was competitive, but I'd always been driven. Growing up as the daughter of immigrants who sacrificed everything for my education, failure wasn't an option. My parents, who ran a small electronics repair shop, worked 14-hour days so I could go to college. My dad would stay up late helping me with homework, even though technical writing was challenging for him. My mom would pack extra meals so I could study through dinner. The weight of their sacrifice pushed me to excel at everything I touched. For 4 years, Aria and I maintained our friendship despite working at different companies. We'd meet for coffee every Sunday, text constantly, celebrate each other's wins. When she got promoted to account coordinator at her startup, I threw her a party. When I landed my first major client at Sterling, she was the first person I called. Then, 18 months ago, Aria's startup folded. She called me crying, saying she was devastated, didn't know what she'd do. Without hesitation, I marched into my boss Connor's office and recommended her for an open position on our team. I vouched for her skills, her work ethic, even offered to train her myself. Maya, Connor had said, you're putting your reputation on the line for her. Are you sure? Absolutely, I replied. Aria's brilliant, you won't regret this. Famous last words. Aria started as a junior strategist, 2 levels below my senior analyst position. I spent weeks showing her the ropes, introducing her to clients, sharing methodologies I'd developed over 6 years of climbing the ladder at Sterling. She was grateful, or so she seemed. I can't believe you did this for me, she'd say, tearing up. You saved my career, Maya, I'll never forget this. The first year was great. We were the dynamic duo. I'd developed the strategies. Aria would charm the clients with her natural charisma. Our campaigns won industry awards. Our client satisfaction scores soared. Connor started talking about creating a new strategy director position, and everyone assumed it would be mine. But slowly, things began to shift. It started small, comments in meetings that seemed supportive on the surface but planted seeds of doubt. Maya's so analytical, Aria would say. Sometimes I worry she gets lost in the data and loses sight of the human element. Or, Maya has such complex ideas, maybe too sophisticated for some of our more straightforward clients. I didn't think much of it at first. Aria had a way of speaking that made criticism sound like concern. Plus, she was my friend. She was looking out for me, right? Then I started noticing that insights I shared with her in private would somehow make their way to other team members, but twisted. I'd mentioned struggling with a demanding client, and suddenly everyone knew I was having issues with relationship management. I'd share a concept I was developing, and Aria would present a similar idea in the next team meeting, acting like she'd conceived it independently. What would you do if you noticed your friend doing this? Let me know in the comments. The breaking point should have been 8 months ago, during the Meridian Corp pitch. I'd spent weeks developing a comprehensive brand repositioning strategy, late nights, weekend research, everything. The night before the presentation, I shared my final slides with Aria, asking for her feedback. The next morning, I walked into the conference room to find Aria presenting my strategy to Connor and the Meridian team. When I confronted her afterward, she gasped and covered her mouth in horror. "Oh my God, Maya, I'm so sorry. I thought you wanted me to present it. You said you were feeling overwhelmed about the pitch, and I was just trying to help." She grabbed my hands, eyes wide with apparent regret. "Please don't hate me. I was only trying to support you." I wanted to be angry, but Aria seemed so genuinely upset. And she was right. I had mentioned feeling stressed. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. "It's okay," I said, hating myself for the words even as they left my mouth. "Just, let's communicate better next time." That campaign won Meridian Corp as a client, a $3 million account. Aria got the credit and a promotion to senior strategist. I got a pat on the back and told to keep up the excellent work. But I stayed quiet. I made excuses. I convinced myself that friendship was more important than office politics. I was so naive. The worst part, my family adored Aria. She'd come to our monthly dinners, charming my parents with her interest in Indian culture and compliments about my mom's cooking. She'd bring gifts for my younger sister and ask about her pre-med studies. My parents would pull me aside and whisper, "She's such a loyal friend to you, Maya. Don't take her for granted." If they only knew. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I was working late again, finishing up a presentation for our biggest client, Nexus Innovations. This wasn't just any campaign, it was the project that would determine who got the new strategy director position. Connor had made it clear. Whoever could secure Nexus's full digital transformation partnership would get the promotion. I'd been developing this strategy for 2 years. Not just the campaign itself, but the relationship with Nexus's CMO, Victoria Park. I'd attended industry conferences just to network with her team, studied their company culture, even learned about Victoria's personal interests so I could connect with her on a human level. The presentation was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I'd spent the entire weekend perfecting every slide, every transition, every talking point. This was my moment, my chance to prove I deserved the strategy director role I'd been working toward for 6 years. That Tuesday night, I was putting the finishing touches on my slides when I realized I'd left my laptop charger at home. The building was nearly empty, just a few lights scattered across the floors. I decided to quickly run up to Aria's desk on the 8th floor. She had the same laptop model and had borrowed my charger before. The elevator was out of service, so I took the stairs. As I climbed past the 7th floor, I heard voices coming from the executive conference room. I recognized Aria's laugh immediately, but the other voice made me pause. It was Victoria Park. What was Victoria doing here at 9:30 p.m., and why was she meeting with Aria? I crept closer to the conference room door, which was slightly ajar. What I heard made my blood turn to ice. "I have to say, Aria, your strategy is remarkable," Victoria was saying. "The way you've positioned our digital transformation to target Gen Z consumers shows real innovation." My strategy, she was talking about my strategy. "Thank you, Victoria. I've been working on this for almost 2 years, Aria replied smoothly. "I really understand Nexus's vision for the future." "And you said you developed this independently, without input from your team." "Absolutely. I prefer to work solo on major projects. It allows me to really immerse myself in the client's needs without getting distracted by committee thinking." I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding. Through the crack in the door, I could see Aria's presentation on the screen. It was my presentation. My slides, my research, my 2 years of work, with her name on everything. I'm particularly impressed with your consumer behavior analysis, Victoria continued. The correlation between digital engagement and purchase intent is exactly what we've been looking for. That analysis had taken me 4 months to complete. I'd worked with our research team, conducted focus groups, even interviewed industry experts. It was my proudest achievement. I spent considerable time on that, Aria said. I believe in comprehensive research. Victoria leaned forward. Aria, I'll be honest. When Connor told me Maya Patel would be presenting on Wednesday, I was prepared to be polite but skeptical. She seems capable enough, but I've heard she can be a bit rigid, get stuck in analysis paralysis. My stomach dropped. When had Victoria heard that about me? Aria sighed sympathetically. Maya's a sweet person, and she works hard, but you're right. She gets bogged down in details and sometimes misses what clients actually want. That's why I thought it was important to show you what a truly strategic approach looks like. I'm so glad you reached out, Victoria said. This unofficial preview has been incredibly valuable. I'll be honest, after seeing your work, I'm not sure why Maya is presenting at all. Well, Aria said carefully, Connor assigned it to her originally. But between you and me, I think he's starting to realize she might not be ready for the strategy director role everyone's been discussing. They talked for another 15 minutes about implementation timelines and budget allocations, all based on my work. Then Aria walked Victoria to the elevator, promising to polish a few more elements before Wednesday's official presentation. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close, then slipped back downstairs to my office. My hands were shaking as I sat at my desk, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Aria hadn't just stolen my presentation. She'd orchestrated an entire deception, positioning herself as the strategic genius while painting me as incompetent. She'd somehow gotten Victoria's contact information, probably from my phone or computer, and arranged this preview meeting to undermine me completely. Rate this betrayal 110 in the comments. I'm curious what you think. But what hit me hardest was the realization that this wasn't new. Aria's comment about Connor, starting to realize I wasn't ready, suggested she'd been poisoning him against me for months. How many conversations had she had, slowly eroding my reputation while building herself up? I thought about all the times I'd shared my ideas with her, all the late-night strategy sessions where I'd bounced concepts off her, trusting her input, all the client insights I'd given her access to. She hadn't just betrayed our friendship, she'd weaponized it. The worst part, I'd made it so easy for her. Every time I'd included her in my process, I'd been handing her the ammunition to destroy me. I sat in my dark office until 3 a.m., staring at my computer screen. The presentation I'd spent 2 years perfecting was now worthless. Aria would present first thing Wednesday morning, taking credit for everything I'd built. Victoria would nod along, already convinced that I was the rigid, detail-obsessed team member who couldn't see the big picture. Unless I did something about it. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in my 6 years at Sterling and Partners. I called in sick. I needed time to think, to figure out how to handle what I'd discovered. But mostly, I needed to know if anyone would stand by me if I told them the truth. I started with Connor, my boss. I called him around noon, saying I needed to discuss something urgent about the Nexus presentation. Could we meet privately? Of course, Maya, is everything all right? You sound concerned. We met at a coffee shop near the office. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head all morning, trying to figure out how to explain without sounding paranoid or vindictive. Connor, I need to tell you something about Aria and the Nexus project. His expression immediately grew guarded. What about it? I took a deep breath. She's been sharing my strategy with Victoria Park. They met last night, and Aria presented my work as her own. Connor set down his coffee cup slowly. Maya, that's a serious accusation. Are you certain about this? I witnessed them myself. Aria showed Victoria my presentation, my research, everything. She told Victoria that I was rigid and couldn't see the big picture. For a moment, Connor was quiet. Then he sighed. Maya, I know you've been under tremendous pressure lately. The strategy director position means a lot to you, and I understand that, but accusing Aria of sabotage, that doesn't sound like you. It doesn't sound like me because it's never happened to me before, I said. hearing the desperation in my own voice. Connor, you've known me for 6 years. When have I ever made excuses or blamed someone else for my problems? Never, he admitted. Which is why this is so concerning. Aria mentioned that you seem to be struggling lately, that you might be feeling overwhelmed by the competition. My heart sank. When did Aria say that? Last week, actually. She was worried about you. Said you'd been talking about feeling like everyone was working against you, that you were becoming paranoid about office dynamics. Connor leaned forward, his voice gentle. Maya, maybe you should consider taking some time off, just to recharge. I stared at him, realizing that Aria had been even more strategic than I thought. She hadn't just stolen my work, she'd preemptively discredited any attempt I might make to expose her. If I pressed the issue now, I'd look exactly like the unstable, paranoid employee she'd described. You're right, I said finally. Maybe I do need some perspective. Connor looked relieved. Good, take the rest of the week. Aria can handle the Nexus presentation on Wednesday. I left that coffee shop feeling completely defeated, but also, for the first time, completely clear about what I was dealing with. Next, I decided to test Ethan Rodriguez from our analytics team. Ethan and I had worked together on several projects, and I'd always considered him a friend. Plus, he'd helped me with the consumer behavior analysis that Aria was now claiming as her own. I found Ethan in his office that afternoon, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying data visualizations and charts. Hey Maya, how's the Nexus prep going? That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, I said, closing his office door. Do you remember the consumer behavior analysis we worked on together? The correlation between digital engagement and purchase intent. Of course, that was some of my best statistical modeling. Why? I chose my words carefully. I'm just curious, have you shared those findings with anyone else? Ethan looked confused. No, that was proprietary research for your project. Why would I share it? So, if someone else claimed they'd developed that analysis independently, you'd know they were lying. Now Ethan looked uncomfortable. Maya, what's this about? I decided to be direct. Aria's been taking credit for my work, including your analysis. She presented it to Victoria Park last night as her own research. Ethan's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like guilt. Maya, he said slowly, Aria came to me yesterday asking for some background on that analysis. She said you'd asked her to follow up on some details for the Nexus presentation. My stomach dropped. What kind of details? She wanted to understand the methodology, see the raw data. She said you were too busy to explain it yourself, but that she needed to be prepared to answer questions during the presentation. And you gave it to her. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Well, yeah, she said she was presenting it on your behalf. I thought you were just being thorough. I felt sick. Aria had manipulated Ethan too, using my name to legitimize her theft of his work. Ethan, I never asked Aria to follow up on anything. She's been lying to you. But I could see in Ethan's eyes that he didn't want to believe it. The alternative, that he'd been tricked into betraying a friend, was too uncomfortable to face. Look, Maya, I'm sure there's just some miscommunication here. Aria's always seemed really supportive of you. Maybe she was just trying to help prepare for a challenging presentation. By claiming she developed the analysis herself. Ethan stood up, clearly wanting this conversation to end. I think you should talk to Aria directly. Work it out between yourselves. I don't want to get involved in office drama. As I left Ethan's office, I realized that Aria's strategy was even more insidious than I'd thought. She hadn't just isolated me from management. She'd created a web of small complacencies that made it nearly impossible for anyone to admit what had really happened. What would you do in this situation? Comment below. The third test was Zoe Kim from the creative team. Zoe and I had collaborated on several campaigns, and she'd always been straightforward with me. If anyone would give me an honest perspective, it would be her. I found Zoe in the break room, making her afternoon tea. Zoe, can I ask you something? Off the record. She looked around to make sure we were alone. Sure, what's up? What's your honest opinion of Aria? Zoe raised an eyebrow. That's random, why? I'm just trying to get some perspective on team dynamics. You've worked with both of us. Zoe stirred her tea thoughtfully. Aria's interesting, she's charismatic, definitely good with clients, but she paused. But what? Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've noticed some patterns. Aria has this way of talking about people that seems supportive on the surface, but actually isn't. Like, she'll say something like, Maya's so thorough. Sometimes I think her attention to detail slows down our momentum. It sounds like a compliment, but it plants this seed that maybe your thoroughness is actually a problem. My heart started beating faster. She's said things like that about me. A few times, and not just about you, about other people too. She did it with Brandon when he was up for the promotion last year. Kept mentioning how driven he was, but in a way that made it sound like he was pushy or aggressive. Zoe looked around again, then leaned closer. Honestly, Maya, I've always wondered if Aria feels threatened by you. You're really talented, and you have this quiet confidence that I think intimidates some people. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone else had noticed Aria's behavior. Zoe, what if I told you Aria has been actively sabotaging my work, taking credit for my projects? Zoe's expression grew serious. I'd say that fits the pattern I've observed. But Maya, proving something like that would be really difficult. Aria's smart about how she operates. But you'd believe me. Yeah, Zoe said without hesitation. I would. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything that had happened. Out of everyone I'd tested, only Zoe had shown any willingness to see the truth. Connor had been manipulated into seeing me as unstable. Ethan had been made complicit in Aria's theft. My other colleagues were either oblivious or choosing to stay out of it. Aria had spent months, maybe years, systematically isolating me while building her own network of support. She'd been playing a game I didn't even know existed. But now I knew, and knowing changed everything. I pulled out my laptop and started planning. If Aria thought she'd won, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. I spent the weekend building my case like a detective preparing for trial. Every conversation I could remember, every instance of suspicious behavior, every piece of evidence I could gather. But more importantly, I started setting traps. The first trap was simple. On Sunday night, I sent Aria a text. Hey, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm having second thoughts about the Nexus presentation tomorrow. What if I told Connor I want you to present instead? You know the material almost as well as I do, and you're so much better with high-stakes clients. Her response came within minutes. Maya, don't be ridiculous. This is your moment. You've worked so hard on this. I would never feel right taking that opportunity away from you. A screenshot saved. The second trap required more finesse. I called Aria, making my voice sound shaky and uncertain. Aria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, anything. I've been feeling like people at work don't respect me lately. Like they think I'm not ready for the strategy director position. Am I being paranoid? Aria's response was perfectly calculated sympathy. Oh, Maya, honey, I think you're just putting too much pressure on yourself. You're incredibly talented. Sure, maybe some people think you're a little intense sometimes, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. What do you mean, intense? Well, you know how you get so focused on the analytics that sometimes you miss the bigger strategic picture? I've heard a few people mention that, but it's not a criticism, it's just your style. Who said that? I don't want to name names and make you paranoid, but Maya, honestly, I think you're overthinking this. Just focus on doing your best tomorrow. Every word was being recorded on my phone. The third trap was the most important. That Sunday evening, I sent Aria an email with a slightly modified version of my presentation, one that included 3 deliberate errors, small mistakes that would be obvious to anyone who truly understood the strategy. Hey Aria, thanks for being such an amazing friend through this stressful time. I'm attaching my final presentation for tomorrow. I know you said you didn't need to see it, but I value your opinion so much. If you notice anything that seems off, let me know. Wednesday morning arrived like a storm. I got to the office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the presentation. I needed to prepare the conference room, but more importantly, I needed to have a conversation with Victoria Park. I caught her in the lobby as she arrived. Victoria, I'm so glad I ran into you. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to preview the presentation with Aria last week. Victoria looked confused. Preview. Oh, didn't she mention it? She said you two met Tuesday night to go over the strategy. I think she was excited to get your feedback before the official presentation. I watched Victoria's face carefully. She was clearly uncomfortable. Maya, I think there might be some confusion. Aria and I haven't met about this project. Perfect. She was lying to cover her tracks, which meant she knew the meeting was inappropriate. Oh, I said innocently, my mistake. I must have misunderstood what Aria told me. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, I walked into the conference room where Connor, Victoria, and 3 other Nexus executives were seated. Aria was already there, looking confident and polished in her charcoal blazer. Good morning, everyone, Connor said. As you know, we're here to discuss Nexus's comprehensive digital transformation strategy. Maya, the floor is yours. I smiled and walked to the front of the room. Actually, before I begin, I'd like to address something important. Aria, could you tell everyone about your meeting with Victoria last Tuesday night? The color drained from Aria's face. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat. What meeting? Aria stammered. The meeting where you presented my strategy to Victoria as your own work. The meeting where you told her I was rigid and couldn't see the big picture. Connor looked confused and alarmed. Maya, what are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Tuesday night. My voice was clear as I narrated what I'd witnessed, followed by the audio of Aria and Victoria's conversation that I'd captured through the conference room door. I spent considerable time on that, came Aria's voice through the speaker, referring to my consumer behavior analysis. I believe in comprehensive research, she continued. The room was dead silent as the recording played. I watched Aria's face cycle through shock, panic, and finally, desperate calculation. This is taken out of context, Aria said quickly. Maya, you're misunderstanding what happened. Really? I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshots. So when you texted me last night saying you would never feel right taking credit for my work, that was also out of context. I showed the room our text exchange, then played the recorded phone call where Aria had subtly undermined my reputation while pretending to support me. And Aria, I continued, I'm curious about something. In your meeting with Victoria, you claimed you developed the consumer behavior analysis independently. But Ethan Rodriguez from our analytics team will confirm that you asked him for the methodology and raw data just yesterday, claiming I had asked you to follow up on details. Victoria Park looked mortified. Aria, is this true? But I wasn't done. I opened the presentation Aria had prepared, the one based on my email from Sunday night. Everyone, please look at slide 21. Aria, could you explain why you've projected a 42% increase in Q3 revenue when Nexus's fiscal year ends in December? Aria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. It was one of the deliberate errors I'd planted. And on slide 27, you've allocated budget for influencer partnerships, but earlier you mentioned focusing on professional demographics. Could you explain how Instagram influencer campaigns align with targeting 45 to 60-year-old executives? Another planted error. Aria had clearly copied my modified presentation without actually understanding the content. Maya, Aria said, her voice cracking, I can explain all of this. I'm sure you can, I replied. You've been explaining away your lies for months, but here's what you can't explain. I pulled up one final piece of evidence. Aria's computer activity logs from last Tuesday, which I'd gotten Zoe to help me access through the IT department. These logs show that you accessed my shared drive at 7:15 p.m. last Tuesday and downloaded my presentation files. Then, at 7:25 p.m., you called Victoria Park. The meeting you claim never happened started at 8:30 p.m., and you presented material you'd stolen from me just 75 minutes earlier. Rate this confrontation 110. This is where it gets good. Connor looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Aria, these are very serious allegations. But Victoria Park spoke first, her voice cold and professional. Mr. Sterling, I need to be honest with you. Aria did contact me last week, and we did meet. She presented this strategy as her own work and made several disparaging comments about Maya's capabilities. She turned to Aria. What I don't understand is why you felt the need to lie about it just now, when Maya asked me directly. Aria's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. I was trying to help. Maya's been struggling, and I thought if I could smooth things over with the client. By stealing her work and lying about her competence, Connor's voice was sharp with anger. It wasn't like that, Aria's voice rose. Maya always gets so anxious before big presentations. I was trying to build confidence with the client so she'd have a better chance of success. It was a desperate lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Aria, I said quietly, just stop lying. She looked at me with something that might have been regret or might have been fury. Maya, you have to understand. No, I interrupted. I don't have to understand anything. What I understand is that you've been systematically sabotaging my career while pretending to be my friend. What I understand is that you manipulated everyone around us to make me look incompetent. What I understand is that you stole 2 years of my work and thought you could get away with it. The room was silent, except for the sound of Aria's shaky breathing. The saddest part, I continued, is that I genuinely cared about you. When your startup folded, I didn't just get you this job, I vouched for you with my reputation. I trained you, supported you, shared everything I knew with you, and you used all of that to destroy me. Victoria Park stood up. Mr. Sterling, I think Nexus needs to reconsider whether Sterling and Partners is the right fit for our company. This level of internal dysfunction and dishonesty is concerning. My heart stopped. Had my confrontation just cost us the client? But then Victoria continued. However, Maya's presentation of the facts today, and her obvious ownership of the strategic work we've seen, demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and competence we're looking for in a partner. She looked directly at me. Maya, I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss moving forward with your strategy. The real strategy, not this copied version with obvious errors. Within 2 hours of that meeting, Aria was escorted out of the building by security. Connor had terminated her employment immediately for theft of intellectual property, misrepresentation to clients, and violation of company ethics policies. But my revenge was just beginning. You see, while I'd been gathering evidence of Aria's betrayal, I'd also been documenting everything else. Every client she'd claimed credit for, every idea she'd stolen from colleagues, every lie she'd told to advance her career. I'd spent weeks quietly reaching out to people, not just at Sterling, but at Aria's previous companies. The picture that emerged was disturbing and comprehensive. Aria hadn't just betrayed me, she'd built her entire career on manipulation and theft. The first call I made was to Lucas Chen, Aria's former supervisor at the startup that had folded. Except it hadn't folded at all. Oh, Aria Chen? Lucas said when I explained who I was. I remember her. We had to let her go for taking credit for other people's work. She claimed she'd developed a social media strategy that belonged to one of our junior creatives. When we confronted her about it, she played victim and accused us of discrimination. Did you document the incidents? Extensively. We had to in case she tried to sue us. Why do you ask? I explained what had happened at Sterling. Lucas was silent for a long moment. I'm not surprised, he finally said, but I am glad someone finally caught her. We always wondered if she'd continue this pattern elsewhere. The second call was to Brandon Torres, the colleague who'd been passed over for promotion the previous year, the one Zoe had mentioned Aria undermining. Brandon, this is Maya Patel from Sterling. I'm calling because I think you deserve to know something about why you didn't get the strategy director position last year. I explained how Aria had systematically undermined him, just as she'd done to me. Brandon was quiet as I shared the details, then asked me to send him everything I'd documented. Maya, I had no idea, I thought I wasn't good enough. You were plenty good enough. Aria made sure no one else could see that. But the most satisfying call was to the industry publication, Marketing Intelligence Weekly. They'd been investigating unethical practices in Seattle agencies, and Aria's case was exactly the kind of story they'd been looking for. The article ran 2 weeks later. The hidden cost of workplace betrayal: how one employee's systematic deception nearly destroyed careers and client relationships. They didn't use Aria's name, but everyone in our industry knew who they were talking about. The article detailed her pattern of behavior across multiple companies, her methods of manipulation, and the long-term damage caused by employees who advance through deception rather than merit. Within a month, Aria's name had become toxic in Seattle marketing circles. Not because I'd gossiped or spread rumors, but because the truth had finally emerged and people were connecting their own experiences with her documented behavior. What's your opinion on this level of revenge? Let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, my own career took an unexpected turn. Victoria Park was so impressed with my handling of the situation and my actual strategic work that Nexus not only signed with Sterling, but requested that I personally lead their account. Connor called me into his office the day after Aria was fired. "Maya, I owe you an enormous apology. Aria played me completely, and I fell for it. Your professionalism throughout this situation and your dedication to protecting both the client relationship and the company's integrity shows exactly the kind of leadership we need." He paused, looking genuinely remorseful. "The strategy director position is yours if you want it, along with a $25,000 salary increase and equity in the company." But the best part wasn't the promotion or the money. It was the email I received from Ethan Rodriguez 2 days later. "Maya, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, and I realize I owe you a huge apology. I was so uncomfortable with the idea that I'd been manipulated that I chose to doubt you instead of facing the truth. That was cowardly, and I'm sorry. I want you to know that I've learned from this, and it won't happen again." Zoe Kim sent a similar message, along with a bottle of wine and a note. "For the woman who taught us all that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing, it's about having the courage to expose those who don't." Even some of the junior employees started approaching me, sharing their own experiences with Aria's subtle undermining. It turned out I hadn't been her only victim, just the one who'd finally fought back. The most unexpected vindication came from an unlikely source: my parents. 3 weeks after Aria's firing, my mom called me. "Maya, we need to talk about Aria." My heart sank. Had Aria contacted them, tried to manipulate them into believing I'd wronged her? "What about her, Mom?" Mrs. Gupta from the shop next door told me something interesting. She said Aria came by last month asking questions about our family business. Wanted to know how much money we made, whether we owned the building, personal things that weren't her business. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions? She asked if we had any debts, if we were struggling financially. Mrs. Gupta thought it was strange. Why would your friend be asking about our private business? Then yesterday, Mrs. Gupta's daughter told her that Aria had approached her too, asking about your student loans, whether our family had helped you pay for school. The picture was becoming horrifyingly clear. Aria hadn't just been sabotaging my professional life, she'd been gathering ammunition for a more personal attack. "Mom, what did you tell Mrs. Gupta to say if Aria came back?" "I told her not to answer any questions." "Maya, what was Aria planning to do with this information?" I closed my eyes, imagining the scenario Aria had probably been constructing. She would have painted me as someone who'd gotten ahead through family privilege, someone whose immigrant parents had secretly funded my success. In an industry that prided itself on meritocracy, that narrative could have been devastating, especially coming from someone who presented herself as a struggling Asian American woman fighting for opportunities. "I don't know, Mom, but it doesn't matter now." "Good," my mother said firmly. I never liked how she asked so many questions about our family. A real friend doesn't need to know everything about your private business. The final piece of poetic justice came 6 weeks later. I was having lunch with Zoe when she showed me a LinkedIn post that made my jaw drop. Brandon Torres, the colleague Aria had undermined the previous year, had been hired as strategy director at Nexus Innovations. Victoria Park had been so impressed with my account management that she'd offered him a position leading their in-house marketing team. "Did you recommend him?" Zoe asked. I suggested Victoria consider hiring someone with his experience, I admitted. Brandon deserved better than what happened to him here. Zoe grinned. So Aria's sabotage actually ended up connecting two talented people with better opportunities. That's beautiful irony. But the sweetest justice was quieter, more personal. Aria had spent years making me doubt myself, making me think I wasn't good enough, smart enough, strategic enough. She'd convinced me that my success depended on staying small, staying quiet, staying grateful for whatever scraps I was thrown. Now I was running campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. Now junior employees were coming to me for mentorship. Now I had the confidence to trust my instincts and stand up for myself. Arya had tried to diminish me, but in the end, she'd forced me to become stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new corner office, the strategy director suite that should have been mine years ago, when I got an unexpected text message. It was from Arya. Maya, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say something. I've been in therapy since everything happened, and I'm starting to understand how wrong I was. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. You deserved better from me. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, because an apology couldn't undo years of betrayal. Sadness, because there had been genuine moments of friendship that I'd treasured. And oddly, relief, because her acknowledgement validated everything I'd experienced. But mostly I felt free. For years, I'd carried the weight of Arya's gaslighting. Every time something went wrong, I'd wondered if I was being paranoid, if I was imagining persecution, if I was the problem. Her betrayal had been devastating, but her admission of wrongdoing was liberating. I didn't respond to her text, not out of cruelty, but because I'd learned something important. I didn't need her apology to move forward. I didn't need her validation to know my worth. I didn't need anything from her at all. Have you ever had someone try to apologize after betraying you? What did you do? Comment below. That weekend, I had dinner with my parents at their house. My mom had made my favorite meal, her special samosas that took hours to prepare. My dad had closed the electronics shop early so we could eat together as a family. We're proud of you, my father said in his careful English, not because you won, but because you fought for the truth. Your friend hurt you, my mother added, but you didn't become like her, you stayed good. As I looked around the table at my parents, these people who had sacrificed everything for my opportunities, who had worked 14-hour days so I could chase dreams they'd never had the chance to pursue, I realized something profound. Arya had tried to make me believe that success required betrayal, that advancement meant stepping on others, that friendship was just another tool for manipulation. She'd spent years trying to convince me that the world was a zero-sum game where someone else's failure was necessary for my success. But she was wrong. My success didn't come from destroying Arya. It came from refusing to let her destroy me. It came from maintaining my integrity, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet. It came from building real relationships based on trust and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and exploitation. The promotion, the salary increase, the recognition, those were nice. But the real victory was simpler and more valuable. I liked the person I saw in the mirror. What would you rate this story overall, 0-10? Let me know in the comments. Today, I mentor young professionals who are navigating office politics and workplace betrayal. I teach them to document everything, trust their instincts, and never sacrifice their integrity for temporary peace. I tell them that the people who try to diminish your light are usually terrified of how brightly you might shine. And when they ask me about Arya, because they always do, I tell them this. The best revenge against someone who tries to steal your success is to become so successful that their theft becomes irrelevant. The best response to someone who tries to dim your light is to shine so brightly that their darkness can't touch you. Arya thought she was playing a game where only one of us could win. She never realized that I was playing a different game entirely, one where success isn't about defeating others, but about becoming the best version of yourself. In the end, that made all the difference. Final question for all my amazing viewers. Rate this story 0-10 and tell me, have you ever had to expose a fake friend? How did it turn out? I love reading your stories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed Maya's revenge story, and subscribe for more epic tales of justice and karma. See you in the next one.